Oh, oh God. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Gabester here. This is the normal raid guide for Spoils of Pandaria. As usual, if you like any other videos for this encounter, feel free to click on the annotations on screen. And with that, let's get started. Now, your raid composition for this fight is pretty much set in stone. The main mechanic is that the group is going to be split up into two unique groups on either side, and they never really get to help each other. So because of this, if you use 3 healers, which you might be prone to do on other encounters, in this case it would simply mean that one of your groups has 2 healers, whereas the other group has 1 still. So unless you bumped it up to 4 healers in total, which seems extreme overkill for the damage on this fight, then you're not really going to gain much from having a 3rd healer, because one group will be imbalanced in that sense. So the damage is not all that severe in terms of healing output requirements, and the DPS check can be quite tight, especially depending on how you handle the basic crates and mechanics. So again, I would recommend 1 healer, 1 tank for each side, so 2 in total, and then just adjust accordingly if things seem to get out of control. So the basic goal for this encounter is to defeat creatures stored within these crates, the Spoils of Pandaria, and upon defeating these creatures, it will release Titan energy into the levers that basically activate the defense mechanism. Once you release 50 energy in any given room, you can open the lever, assuming both groups have done the same on either side, and upon completing 2 rooms for a total of 100 energy, and opening the levers, the fight will be over and you will have defended everything and all that good stuff. So that's the basic goal. You open these crates, you fight the creatures, you have a limited time to do so, and as long as you release enough energy and defeat enough creatures within your room, along with the other group, then you will be successful. So let's talk about the crate sizes, how many there are, and the energy levels that they give you. So as you enter the room, you'll notice there are 4 quadrants or rooms down below with crates in them. And generally speaking, each group of 5 players will handle 2 rooms, both of the rooms being on the same side. As you enter the overall spoils area from the top, the 2 rooms immediately to your sides are Mogu rooms. So these crates all contain Mogu creatures. And then the far rooms contain the Mantid creatures. So when you first start at the encounter, groups are forced to go into particular rooms to begin. So the group on the right has to go into this front right room, which is the Mogu room, while the other group is forced to go to the Mantid room in the back left immediately. That's just because the way the gates open. And then once you deal with those in opposite corners of one another, then you open the gate and you can move to the other ones. Now here you'll see the list of the crate types, and this is for each individual room. So each room that your group will be in has this number of crates in them. So we have 18 small crates, each worth 1 energy, for a total of 18 energy. We have 6 medium crates, each worth 3, again a total of 18 from those. 2 large crates, worth 14 each, for 28 total. And then there are also 2 green crates, which are not actually worth any energy and instead provide an NPC that can give you a buff, which we'll talk about in a bit. So when you're within each room, you have a number of options about how you open the crates, kill the enemies, and therefore get your 50 energy goal. So you can see that the total energy available is 64, it looks like, and you only need 50. So you have 14 with which you can, choose not to kill a large, for example, or leave out a few mediums, or, not get a few smalls, or whatever it is that you want to do. So I'll talk about what we found when we were experimenting and what ended up working best for us in a little bit. All right, so let's just talk about the different enemy types that you will see based on the crate size for each room, starting with the Mogu room, since that's the first one that my group deals with on the right. So the small crates will give you the Guardians, which are the little dogs there that you see. You can also get animated stone Mogu, which is in the top there, and a burial urn, which is in the top of the screen as well. So the animated stone Mogu will cast hardened flesh on players, which is basically a magic dispellable debuff that does physical damage every second per stack, but also slows the target's movement speed. So as a healer, this is kind of one of the main things I dispel in this Mogu room. When it reaches, 2 or more stacks, especially on a player, especially players that are trying to dodge stuff or deal with other mechanics, it's a good idea to get rid of that just so they can move around, if not to help deal with damage as well. The burial urns are pretty simple. The main thing is not to stay within 4 yards of them, if possible, because they do a pulse of pretty heavy damage if you're near them. In addition to that, when they die, they also do some damage within a little bit larger radius, but still pretty small. So for the most part, your melee don't want to get too close to them. You can use cleaves from far away or just have your range kill them off. And then finally, the Guardians, the dogs, those are pretty basic. They just apply a bleed to the target, so it should be on the tank, but they have very little health, and as with many things here, you just want to cleave them down. So for the most part, dealing with small crates in the Mogu room is just a matter of releasing a number of them at once, having the tank pick them up, and then cleaving everything down. Your healers should be aware of players near burial urns and dispelling the hardened flesh as well. Now for the medium crates in Mogu, things get a little more interesting. You have 2 different types. The modified anima golem is probably the most important to deal with properly. And when these appear, they will create, similar to the Dark Animus fight from Throne of Thunder, they basically create 2 portals in random locations that force players to swap their spots if you're standing in them. So you'll get 2 portals in a random spot. 1 player stands in each, and after the explosion goes off after a few seconds, those players will be swapped locations. So there you can see a red marker in 2 spots. So I stand in one, and now the swap goes off, and we're teleported. So if you do this properly, there's no damage involved. The swap doesn't do anything bad to you. However, if there fails to be a player within one of the marked swap locations when it goes off, it will deal about 300,000 damage to the raid. So it's really important that you handle this quickly. The easy way we found to do it was just to have 1 player, as a healer, I did it because I can move around and be in melee as well. 1 player just kind of announced they're going to get the close one to the melee, and then 1 player will get the one that's far away, and that usually worked out. The other thing the anima golems do is use a crimson wake sort of ability on the ground that will heal enemies that step in it for 10% of their health every second. So again, it's a good idea to keep things out of that. You can either just kill the anima golem quickly so that this doesn't become an issue, or just have your tank kite things out of the waves whenever needed. So the other enemy type from the medium crates in the Mogu rooms would be the Shadow Ritualist spawns. You may have seen one a moment ago. Now, these did not seem all that dangerous, although to be fair, it's possible that we simply didn't face them very frequently, in the group I was in anyway, to actually see what they were like if they were up for very long. Basically, the pattern that we used, and I'll get to that in a moment, really didn't allow the Shadow Ritualists to be active for very long. So that said, they'll basically cast a dot on random players that does shadow damage, and it's dispellable with Magic Dispel. And they also will use Mogu Runes of Power, which are basically runes cast underneath creatures that will buff the creatures, increasing their haste by 100%. So you may remember this similar mechanic from Rune Master Mulgheim in Old War, the council fight there. Basically the same sort of thing. I don't know if players actually can benefit from that rune, but because the similar mechanic from the Mantid medium crate enemies only works on friendly targets, I'm going to assume that that's the case here as well, that the Rune of Power only works for friendly targets for the enemies as well. Now, finally, we have the large enemies from the large crates. So there are really only a couple of these per room that you can actually activate, just 2 in total. And these are kind of lieutenants or mini bosses. They have quite a bit of health, but as you saw before, killing them will give you 14 of your 50 needed energy. So doing 2 large guys alone will give you half of your energy, a little more. So there you can see a new one we just spawned, Zhu Yin. And these guys, for the Mogu room, have a couple basic powers. The first is simply that they'll do an area of effect that does about 150,000 damage to everyone in the room, pretty much. This is not very frequent, so it's not a huge threat. It's just something to be aware of. Keep your room members topped off as a healer, all that stuff. More importantly, these guys will frequently cast Return to Stone. Basically, this will do some damage and forms a stone statue. This statue will walk around. You can see them all around the room there. They have fairly low health, but they will try to get in melee range of someone and use sort of a cleave attack that does pretty heavy physical damage, and more importantly, will stun the player as well. So, because they don't have very much health, we found the best thing to do was to either cleave them down when there's a group nearby, or to simply have players with dots dot them up a little bit, and then they'll die slowly. The main thing here, remember, is that they continue to spawn throughout the duration of the lieutenant's lifespan, the large ad lifespan. So if you leave that up for a long time and just focus on the little ads, it's never going to die and you're just going to keep having to deal with them. Additionally, the tank will take more and more damage the longer that large guy's up. So generally speaking, it's best to burn the large guy down quickly while dealing with the small ads, the statues, in a comfortable fashion. You don't want them to overwhelm you, but you don't want to dedicate all your damage to them. The faster the big guy dies, the better. So the Mantid room enemies are again completely different than Mogu, so we'll just go through them in order. The small crate enemies are the Bombardier, which will throw a bomb at a player at range and create sort of a wind trail that melee especially need to watch for and not stand in. The War Callers are pretty basic. They should just be tanked by the tank, of course, and they sort of have an enrage attack that will try to shatter the armor of the tank, but we didn't find that this was a very frequent occurrence. I guess it depends how many small ones you fight at one time. And then finally, the most dangerous small enemy for Mantid is the Kuchong or Kunchong. These will cast pheromones, which are these little orange circles you can see all around the room, and similar to the Garrelon fight from Heart of Fear. Basically, standing in these, you take heavy damage every second, so you don't want to do that, obviously. But more importantly, they spawn pretty frequently, so if you don't deal with the little eggs, which are stationary when they spawn, you're just going to get a series of these all around the room and not have very much space to work with. And unlike the Mogu room, using the space that you're given to position is really important in the Mantid room. So for the medium Mantid enemies, first you've got the Amber Priests. And these are not inherently very dangerous, but they heal all the other friendly Mantid. And this can be quite a lot of extra damage you have to deal. So the heal is called Residue, and it's dispellable with any offensive dispel. So Priest Dispel or Purge from Shaman, stuff like that. For this reason, it's a good idea, if possible, to have at least one offensive dispeller in each of your 5-man groups so that you have a way to get rid of that. Because if not, you can still do it, but you have to either spawn very few medium crates so you don't get a lot of priests, burn the priest down quickly when it appears, or just do a lot of extra DPS to outdo the heal that occurs. Then the other medium enemy is the Wind Wielder. These guys are also not all that dangerous, but you have to be very careful of their main attack, which is Windstorm. They'll basically spawn a tornado that spins around in sort of an oblong shape or half circle, or not half circle, but it's not quite an exact circle. Basically, the path slowly changes as it spins. And each one of these tornadoes will do really heavy damage to anyone that gets hit. So it's a little bit tricky, especially for melee, that are kind of forced to be in melee range of the mobs, to exactly get out of those at all times, or just see where they're going to come from. So again, if you spawn the Wind Wielder, make sure you kill it off quickly, or just be very aware of where those tornadoes are. Finally, they will rally, which increases the damage of friendly Mogu, basically. It increases it by 50%, but it's split among all targets, so it's really not that dangerous at all. They're buff, and this can be purged, but you really don't have to. So focus on the priest mostly. There's a priest right there, actually. All right, and then finally, for the large Mantid enemies, really, they're all the same. They're commanders, similar to the Mogu. They all kind of do the same stuff. But these are probably the most important enemies in the entire fight, for both sides included. And these are the commanders. So Mantid commanders essentially will cast Set to Blow on random raid members. And it always seems to target ranged or healers, preferably. Basically, the player will get a debuff that's 15 seconds, and they'll get 4 stacks of the Set to Blow bomb, or Set to Blow debuff. For each stack that's on them, once the 15-second duration is up, the player will explode in a short radius around them, including themselves, for 200,000 fire damage per stack. So if you don't remove any stacks, you'll take 800,000 damage when it explodes. However, when you have the debuff, you get an extra action ability, and hitting that will drop a bomb at your current location, which removes one of your stacks. Now, the bombs themselves initially have a very small radius, so I think you'll see them start to happen pretty soon here. You can kind of see the bombs in the bottom left there. That's kind of behind my frame, so I'll probably turn. There you go. You can see one near our druid. She's dropping some. So all along the left, those are the bombs she's dropping. Basically, the small circle they have is sort of their initial activation ring, and then the large circle is their final explosion ring. So the idea is to use your extra action button while you are moving. Make sure you're moving, and then you can pretty much spam it almost as fast as you can hit it. As long as you're moving, you'll drop bombs not on top of each other, but slightly off center of one another, and you can remove all 4 of your stacks this way. Now, these 4 bombs will then wait there for 30 seconds, after which time they will explode, again doing 200,000 damage to anyone in their radius. But the radius, you can see, is very clearly marked with the red line there. So that's the basic way you handle the large guys, is people will get Set to Blow. It's almost constantly on one of your ranged members, pretty much, or your healer. So the best thing you can do is to use the space you're given in the room and take advantage of that so that it doesn't block players, especially your melee or tank, from getting access to crates later on. So try to use empty space that you've cleared out in the past, like our Shadow Priest is doing right there. Excellent. So he's just running along the wall, spamming that to drop the bombs, and now he's free with the stack gone to come back and do his normal stuff. And there you got another one. Again, it's really frequent, even with one guy. So the other thing that the commanders do for the Mantid is just a constant tick of 30,000 damage on everyone on your side. So it's not really that dangerous, but it just, again, keeps your healer on your toes, kind of keeps everyone topped off, gives you something to worry about and focus on. But the main thing is handling the bombs. So that covers all the basic enemy types. Now we'll get into sort of the handling of crates, how you go about structuring your order, clicking them, all that good stuff. So the final crate type to discuss is actually the green crates. And there are 2 of these in every room, so 4 in total for each group, basically, that they can use. And when you open a green crate, it will spawn a random Pandarian that is sort of an enemy at first, but eventually becomes an ally in a way. So when you open one, you can see there we got the Mistweaver Spirit. You actually get a random Pandarian of 3 different types. It can be the Healer Mistweaver, the Brewmaster Tank guy, or the Windwalker DPS guy. Each of these will attack you and you must kill them. And while you're killing them, they have, abilities they'll use to try to kill you before that, just like any other enemy. So the Mistweaver that we just saw basically does a spinning crane kick that sucks players in and does damage, pretty heavy damage to them for a few seconds. And she also will use Eminence. So she'll heal the targets around her, essentially. But she has low health, just like all these guys, so you can kill her pretty quick. The Brewmaster is kind of one of the more dangerous ones. He will use Keg Toss, so he'll do some damage on targets and anyone around them and slow them. And then he'll use Breath of Fire. And if you are in range of Breath of Fire after you've gotten Keg Toss, just like a regular monk tank, it will do heavy damage over time and disorient you. And on, it's like he's got a lot of vengeance or something, because the version that he does tons of damage. So you have to be really careful about getting hit by that. And then finally is the Windwalker, which you see here. And he basically will charge at a random player, someone in the distance. And in addition to doing damage to them and paralyzing that player, he will leave a trail of blossoms on the ground, which do heavy, heavy damage to anyone that stands in them. So the best thing we found was for melee players, when that guy's active, to stand on the opposite side of your ranged or healers, so that if he charges, you're not at risk. And then your healer should be aware that when someone becomes paralyzed, it's just a magic dispel to get rid of it. So in each of these cases, once you kill the Pandaren, they'll drop a little green icon on the ground that you can click on. And a player of the matching role, when clicking on this, will gain a buff that lasts 3 minutes. So there's really no point in going through the buffs. Essentially, if you're a DPS player, click on the DPS one. If you're a tank, get the tank one when he dies, and the healer, get the healer one. Only one player can get the buffs at any given time. So basically, you get to decide who gets those if you get the DPS one. Otherwise, it's just the person that can get the tank or the heal one, pretty much. And as I said, they'll last 3 minutes, and you have about a little under 5 minutes to do each room. So if you want to spread them out, you can do one crate at the beginning of your room and then one crate kind of halfway or something like that. Or you can do both of them early on. It's up to you. But just remember, you get random Pandarans, so you don't always get to decide which crate's going to have what buff for you. All right, so let's talk about strategy, which is basically how you open the crates, in what order, and therefore what this means for your group, how you're dealing with stuff. So as I mentioned before, the goal is to, you get 50 Titan energy essentially, and you get 1 for smalls, 3 for mediums, and 14 for larges. So there are a number of combinations you can do. Now the main strategy we found that worked best, that you see in the video here, is what I would call sort of a grouping of large and small and medium and small. Essentially, we decided that the larges, because you could deal damage to them while pretty much doing everything else in the room, so while dealing with a lot of other stuff at the same time, they were more efficient than trying to stick with the small stuff and the medium stuff. More importantly, perhaps, at least in the Mantid room, for our group in particular, we found that the medium enemies were a lot more annoying to deal with, in addition to larges and or smalls at the time. So what we wanted to do was essentially quarantine the different enemy types into these sets, so that we would never deal with mediums and larges at the same time. Instead, we would deal with larges and smalls, and then once those are under control, do mediums and smalls. And that would, again, quarantine things off so that the medium and large never work together, which is really important in the Mantid, in my opinion. So, to that end, our group initially would spawn the first green crate right by the door, because we're on the right here. The other group might have a different layout. But basically, we spawn that green crate, get that buff quickly, spawn a number of small ones. It takes a moment for the large one to be clickable, but once that's active, then we can spawn that one. And the basic plan is to do 16 smalls, because that's the minimum number you'll need if you do 3 mediums as well and 2 larges. So if you split that up into sort of 4 sets approximately, you're going to want to do 4 smalls every time you open a large or a medium in combination with that, for the most part. The other way to do it is to do a lot of extra smalls with your larges and your mediums, and then you'll just have mediums left over at the end. Anyway, so that's what we did initially, is spawn the large, spawn 4 so smalls that were near it, AE the smalls down while we're killing the large, with cleave damage and dots and all the normal stuff. And then once that first large is dead, we move on to the second large, which is again along the same wall. And again, open all the smalls around there and repeat the process. And once that second large is dead, then we go to the other wall, which is where we're at now. Open all the smalls along that wall there, along with the medium. And here you can see we're first medium, so we're only dealing with the one animus at the time. And that's kind of the nice way to do it. And then open all the smalls again. And then there's another medium if we need it. So it worked out pretty well. Again, it doesn't matter so much. I think the Mogu room is actually the more difficult, or excuse me, the Mantid room is more difficult. So here you can see we're just doing our final medium. We actually got more smalls than we needed, but that's fine. They're really easy to kill. And you can see here that there's a delay. So once you finish your room, your lever is pullable, but you have to wait for the other group to finish as well. So both groups basically start the next room at the same time. So we'll just watch through as we do the same basic strategy in the Mantid room here. And you can kind of see what this looks like with the commentary. So again, we open the green right away. So this is the Windwalker, so we want to try to kill it kind of quickly because the charge and the CC and especially the stuff on the ground is pretty annoying. And now we got a large active, and we're skipping that medium that's right there. Again, we don't want the medium and the large at the same time. So we're doing larges plus some smalls that are just convenient nearby. And cleaving down the small stuff while we kill the large, pretty basic. There's that charging wind thing I mentioned, along with the stuff on the ground, so you have to avoid that. And our two range members that are with us, in addition to our warrior DPS, the ranged people are just dealing with the bombs pretty much constantly. So again, try to keep them on the edges of the room. And now we're going over to open some more larges, or excuse me, some more smalls, because we still have quite a ways to go in this large, and we don't want to waste DPS. So having always at least 3 or 4 targets is a good idea just for efficient damage. And especially with our particular group's makeup with the monk, double monks, and a warrior for melee, we can do quite a bit of cleave sort of damage. So there we finished our first large, and we would open the second large right away, but we're kind of scared of bombs, so we're trying to dodge those. So we open the green, and then we'll do the large and all these smalls that are around here once the bombs are cleared out. And that was the Brewmaster, so I'm actually running away from him because I got keg thrown or keg smashed, whatever. And his breath of fire, as I said, is very scary. So I just try to stay at range until that's done with and he's dead. And yeah, so you can kind of see this playing out. We have yet to open any mediums on this side, just like we did on the Mogu side, because we don't want to deal with mediums and larges at the same time. And as long as you're efficient with your cleave damage and whatnot, you can kind of see this plays out pretty well. This segment is actually turning into kind of a slow walkthrough, which I didn't intend, but I'm just going to roll with it and keep it going. Because that's, kind of important. This is sort of the ultimate strategy, is just figuring out which crates you want to do in what order. So finally, the last large guy's dead. We're finishing off the smalls there. I think there's a couple hanging around. We don't really need them all. So I'm getting this one here. And then we're going to do pretty much everything in the corner by the door, because we still need our either our 3 mediums or 2 mediums and another small. So all that in the corner is plenty sufficient for us. And our Shadow Priest was a good guy, Shadow Priest, and ran through with his dispersion to get rid of those bombs so that our melee could safely get in here. And you can see the timer at the top. We have plenty of time. Again, with many of these normals, we're very overgeared for this content, our group is. So this can't be an exact measure of how easy this fight is for an appropriately geared group. But the same, principles and order and mechanics and all that stuff apply. So there we are. So that's the basic strategy that we found that worked best. Again, just segmenting off the crate sizes so you're only opening 2 different types at any given time, and you're not getting a combination of all 3 or a combination of 2 types that you don't like to deal with. And I believe that is it, really. That should cover everything for the Spoils of Pandaria normal raid guide. Again, just figure out your groups initially, get everything nice and even, then plan your crate opening patterns, what it is you want to deal with at the same time versus things you want to avoid, and then just a couple practice pulls and you should get it down. Good luck, and thanks for watching.